Please welcome Chris from NewRocket. Apologies straight away to the marketing people at NewRocket for the rocket going up there. That has nothing to do with them, and just my interpretation of NewRocket. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm very good. I'm very good. They'll be emailing me already saying, we're brand guidelines around using rockets and things like that. But hey, you'll get away with it, and it's already happened. So what are we going to do, right?
Yeah, there might be another one a bit later, right? Just a warning.
No
It was
worries.
irresistible when there was a rocket in the title.
Absolutely.
So new rocket, new job. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so interesting journey. As you would know, and anyone that sort of follows and stalks on LinkedIn, I left ServiceNow in September last year after 9.5 years of, joining it in its early 500s of people, and I think it blasted through. There's another rocket thing, 17,000 people by the time I left, right? And it continues to grow and do its thing. And for me, where I was in my career and what I wanted to do next and sort of leave my imprint, if you will, or make a dent in the universe, it was time to do something different. And, a 500 person to a 17,000 person organization is quite different in terms of how it operates, how it works, and things like that. And then these guys reached out and approached me, and ServiceNow ecosystem is a tight one, and we all know what it looks like. And the opportunity was there to come and lead the EMEA go-to-market practice, if you will, and still sort of keep my innovation hat on, which is near and dear to my heart. So that's where we are. And joined on January the 4th, and then the 13th of January, we actually launched the new brand under NewRocket, which really is the coming together of 6 boutique partners who all had individual skills in their own right across the varying sort of excellence areas, if you will, or platform areas, shall we say. And now we're a 600-person strong company, global presence, all of those sort of fun things. And I'm fortunate to lead the EMEA side of the business.
That sounds like a huge but very interesting leap. And what sort of specialist areas then do NewRocket have, or are they, ITSM house, or are they multiple different disciplines? What are their specialities?
Yeah, I think there's no surprise that a lot of customers, a lot of vendors, software solutions start in ITSM, right? Whether we like it or not, there's still a lot of work to do in those areas. Around support and looking after employees and things like that. And now that we all work from anywhere, that model of service support, service desks, all those sort of things has changed significantly. So that has to keep evolving and even transforming to some extent. But I think for us, some of the superpowers that as we call them, certainly around experience, UX, UI, how you interact with things, how you touch things. You and I were just talking about this software eCam, and how to produce something like this previously to lock down. You'd need an army of technicians, probably 400 kilometers of cables, cameras, microphones, goodness knows, makeup departments, and all that stuff. And here you are, one-man bands producing a show streaming live over the internet. So, that's changed. So experience itself, but also in terms of employee experience, joiners, movers, leavers, but also how you interact with software, how you interact with departments in a sort of a shared services model. And then you have the other side of it, which is all around security, risk, and integrated risk management. We're not short of new regulatory controls and things that are going on in the world. So that's a key area for us, but also securing and operating an enterprise. So security, incident response, vulnerability response, patching, all those sort of things, threat monitoring, and so on. And then I would say sort of the third really looks at how do you support your customers? How do you provide service to those customers? Whether it's in a B2B or even B2C sort of format. We have a lot of service providers, system integrator customers as well. And, they're a one-to-many model. So how do we help them? How do we support them? There's sort of 3 of the key areas that we focus on. Of course, we do ITSM and CMDB and, all the pins, if you will, that are under the covers that sort of enable a business with technology and their platforms. But then it's about how do we go bigger, how do we go wider, and how do we get really across the enterprise to deliver those outcomes.
I think there's a whole bunch of interesting points there, some of which we'll come back to actually, because I kind of semi-predicted some of those. But I'm interested hear that one-to-many distinction as well, because
Yep.
I think a lot of people don't pick up on the different models that are required for internal IT support, and then support for an MSP style model,
Right.
which may have multiple layers with multiple connections and multiple different contracts in it, whereby you are connecting to a company that's then got 10 different offices with
Yeah.
different layers on it, and it's a completely different product to just
Mhm.
supporting somebody internally in IT. And
Yep.
I've seen that people trip up on that so often. They try and bend their internal support product to do that, and it just doesn't
Yep.
work.
Yeah,
So
literally not an hour ago, I got off the phone with a large customer of ours in Cape Town who, have basically got not only customers all over the world, but when you start looking at that in terms of, managed infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, solutions, platforms, all that good stuff. But then you add in data sovereignty requirements. But then on top of that, how do you provide one single scalable, consistent experience that is smart enough to then know where to go and go, "Ooh, hang on, Martin's here. There's different data sovereignty requirements or security requirements around Martin and client identifiable data and things like that. We need to do that a bit differently." And that sort of historically has been an enterprise architect's dream. Build that massive interconnected complex platform of integrations and goodness knows what else. But now it's not in your data centers anymore. You're cloud to cloud and you're all over the place and in different regions. And in some cases, you don't have access to all the things you maybe used to have access to. So it's really complex in that sense. And at some point, someone does sort of say, internally, well, how much does all this cost? And you're like, oh, good God, right, let's figure that out. And is it cost effective? Are we operationally, doing the things we should be doing, but also at the same time delivering on the outcomes, right? We've seen for years, people, offshore things, outsource things, find third-party providers, go down the SIAM model, and those sort of things. That's all great. And all those contracts often having, change improvement, transformation. We're going to take you from level 1 to level 3. How do you track that? How do you manage it? And more importantly, how do you enforce it? That gets really, really tricky. If it's one-to-one, you've got a good chance, maybe a little bit more. But when you're doing one to thousands of customers, it's just super, super difficult to do those things.
yeah, and it does require so much specialist skills, and you touched on it there with the security as well. The whole world's changed, and we will come on to that in a minute or two. But I think, hold on to the security thing while I just tell everybody how we met initially, and
Mm.
then where you were just a couple of weeks ago. So if I just press my next button, and we got some VT rolling here off IT in the Park and Nowbox, which is where Chris initially met me. I was running the show, and Chris came and did a couple of hosting and speaking jobs for me, and then that fell off a cliff. However, 2.5 years later, I'm not back doing shows, but ServiceNow were back doing a show just last week or the week before. And I guess you were there with NewRocket. Tell us about Knowledge, Chris. How did it go?
Yeah, so knowledge is back, right? And it's kind of cool because it's gone regional, right? Pre-lockdown, the last one I did, and obviously I was a ServiceNow employee then, was close to 25,000 people in Vegas, right? And you can just imagine, right? Just enormous buzz, atmosphere, etc. And then boom, the world stops spinning, right? Literally. So how do you bring that back, knowing that people have sort of got a little bit more accustomed to digital experiences, the amount of content they consume, the length of content they can consume as well, but also how do you sort of reconnect on a human level? So yeah, last week was The Hague, just south of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, for those of you who don't know. I think it's close to 2,000 people in the end. And we were fortunate to be offered an opportunity to attend and obviously sponsor and interact there. So it was cool, right? I mean, you had Bill McDermott, Nick Sitson, two of the most senior people at ServiceNow. and then a heap of other people, obviously, as part of that, and the EMEA leadership team. And it was really interesting because I think historically you've had, people sign up, they turn up. We have very strict sort of guidance, I guess, if that's the right word, around what we could and couldn't do in terms of the booze, not in a bad way, but like, green, right? Don't bring paper-based stuff, unrecyclable things. We're not interested in USB keys and drinks bottles and tchotchkes. Like, we all got that stuff at some point in time. Let's not make it about that. Let's make it about a people connection and those sort of things. So what was really good was, the conversations that we had with customers. There was a huge pent-up demand that people wanted this type of interaction, and you get so much more out of it as a result. And I would say of all the conversations we were having, they were, in a, let's call it a salesman's sort of hat on. They were very qualified. They were very direct. And a lot of people knew what they wanted. So they made their way around the show floor and the booths and the sessions with a real sort of purpose and intent around what they wanted and what they want to get out of it. And to some extent, we had some customers, very large, pharmaceutical enterprises, saying to us, we've seen you guys on LinkedIn. We love the brand. We love what you're able to do with the platform. We just want to work with you. And you're like, sign me up, right? We're on our way. So it's fantastic. And, for me personally, I know a lot of people at ServiceNow. So to reconnect with a lot of those people who I hadn't seen for 2.5 years was really, really good. And good friends, right? More than anything. And it's not about selling and the marketing side of it. That sort of takes care of itself to some extent. This is just like, what are you doing? What have you been up to? Like, and, we're all on video, and suddenly you realize people still have legs because you don't see below the neck down, right? And yeah, it was a great event, and I'm really fortunate that next week I'm off to the Vegas side of the show. So that will be, I think, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in Las Vegas, and the Sydney one is on at the same time. And again, in my global role, if you will, of Chief Innovation Officer, I'll be representing NewRocket there in Las Vegas, and that'll be really interesting because again, it's scaled down. And the last time I was there, it was 20 odd thousand people, right? So it's going to be a very different feel, and I think a bit more intimate, a bit more sort of directed, if you will. But I think that's great because you do get a lot of traffic at big trade shows, but how much of it is really qualified and useful is always up for debate.
Yeah, and I think you make a really interesting point there, because one of the strengths, if you like, when I was doing shows which were regional, was the fact that was about 300 people in the audience. But that meant you got a fair chance of talking to whoever was presenting, because
Yep.
they were going to be in the room for 8 hours, and you're probably going to be able to bump into them for 10, 15 minutes. And
Yep.
are you going to chat to Bill for 10 or 15 minutes? Maybe you get to, but one of the 25,000 people in the audience, not many
Yep.
of those are going to get to speak to the key players. So one of the
Yep.
strengths that we did have was the things were smaller, which is a bit bizarre, but it does mean that your conversations are generally longer as well, because you can find who you want to speak to and spend some time with them. But the flip side of the coin, as far as marketing departments are concerned, are that they want to actually see the number of people who are at an event, and that's them. They tick the boxes off, and oh yeah, there was 25,000 people at that event, so that was going to be brilliant for us. And sometimes it works the other way around.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of doing less but doing it better, right? And higher quality, higher qualified, and more meaningful conversations, and that I know that are going to go somewhere. And even this week, we've probably had, certainly of mine, I've probably had 5, if not 6 conversations already with those clients where we're sort of progressing towards how do we get NDAs, MSAs and things like that in place. So phenomenal as a return for us. Really good.
Next scene, Chris.
Uh-oh.
Which is just where we really got ahead of ourselves slightly, which was while we were away for 2.5 years. What was going on, what became really big, what became really important. And I've just chucked in a couple of icons there to represent, different locations, different forms of communication, bringing everybody together on the service desk, working collaboratively, the database one there, you mentioned it earlier, security, suddenly things that you haven't thought about before, working from home, about the data people have got access to. How do we handle all of that? And then the bottom icon there is meant to show you measurement of performance across the whole network of people who are no longer in the building with you. I mean, which elements of those do you felt accelerated due to the pandemic,
Yeah, I
in
think,
particular?
yeah, it's really interesting. I think that power is the wrong word, but maybe it's not necessarily decision making either, shifted more towards the employee, right? Around what do I need, right? What's important to me to be able to work from home effectively, right? And I think you look at that and try to understand that. And I think, if you'd watched any of the, hey, live to so and so, we're going to talk to this person about the pandemic and then that's and the other. I think everyone realized how poor their Wi-Fi was at home, right? If nothing else, it confirmed that you got a pretty shoddy connection for whatever reason, right? So you look at that and you say, well, what's appropriate for me to be most productive? For some people that was then maybe don't have a dedicated room, maybe they're sat at a kitchen desk or a kitchen counter or wherever it may be. So certain things work for certain people and not for others. I'm fortunate; I've got my own office at home, got a big 34-inch screen, a camera, a light, and all that good stuff. But that's not the same for everyone, right? So I think what was really interesting was then you sort of said, well, what about our endpoints? What are our end users using? And I did hear horror stories of some where they just didn't have enough equipment because everyone was coming to the office. So they took a heap of laptops and devices away from people in IT who generally had them, and gave them to business users who generally didn't have them, and suddenly allowed them to work from home. So then you start talking about security and VPNs and all that other sort of complicated stuff, and authentication and Okta and stuff. So I think that put another lens on things as well. But at the same time, you had many sort of classic, I would call them client server applications that were never built to be accessed outside the four walls. So cloud-based software became obviously more relevant than it had ever been. But what we also found was the time to purchase shrunk massively because you had to make a decision. You had to move on. Gone were these big RFP processes, maybe even bake-offs and proof of concepts. It's like, look, you're in the top right of the ratings, or on a quadrant or a top 10 list. Clearly, you're doing something right. I mean, look at Zoom, right? That's what we need. It makes sense. How do we just make this happen, right? So I think in that case, it sort of highlighted as well where you had not the luxury, but sort of relied heavily on people and processes that, hey, Martin's down the hallway, let's go have a chat and we'll make this happen. Martin's not. Martin's 400 miles away. Right? How do we do that? So then you suddenly look in the collaboration tools, right? Teams, Slack, all of those things become really prevalent. So I think a lot of it came down to the employee and how they stay engaged and connected. But underneath that, technology was really about how do we keep it secure? How do we support it? How do we still patch things and keep them managed when, we really can only get to the endpoint, which is the outside of my house where my internet comes in. What happens beyond there? They're under no control whatsoever. But I think the other part, is the work-life balance. Suddenly realized what that meant. The life part, many of us were missing out on. And now that we are where we are, we were just talking about sort of, coming out of all these restrictions between England and Scotland and wherever. The life part has more relevance, right? And, now I feel a little bit cheated in the morning if I don't get to walk the dogs, or if I'm not around when the kids come home from school and, hey, you've scheduled a meeting then. Sorry, I'm already doing something, right? So I think a lot of that happened. And what we ended up doing was finding solutions and technology to meet our employees and customers where they are, not necessarily where we expect them to be. And that then, whether it's mobile, remote, cloud-based, software as a service, they all became really, really important things.
Yeah, I genuinely think that it probably was the last nail in the coffin for most client server products. I think those people who still had them, immediately the pandemic started, all went up and hid somewhere. I certainly know of a number of organizations whereby, things go wrong, they fall over, and suddenly they realise they can't even get in the building to fix something, and it's oh my God, what are we going to do? That server was supporting 6 universities or whatever it happens to be, and it's gone down. Well, should have been in the cloud in the first place, guys. So that was the obvious one. But I think also we have the different types of organizations as well. So if I take some of the public sector organizations, and I'll quote from a couple of my friends here who worked for local authorities in planning, and he was sent home with some dusted off laptop that'd been in the back of a cupboard somewhere, and he was used to using some giant CAD screens and things, and he's sent home with some crappy little laptop and told to get on with it. And he said, well, they'll be lucky to get 4 hours a day out of me working from home. So I think it's very, very different dependent on who the individuals are. The flip side of the coin there was, I was talking to somebody yesterday who's got a son in their early 20s, and he was complaining that he was being made to go back into the office. So I think much as you like your coffee in the morning and maybe the newspaper or whatever it is, and sitting on the porch for half an hour at 8:30 rather than sitting on M25 for an hour and a half, then the expectation of a lot of the younger people is that, look, we just proved we don't need to go into the office. Why are you making me go back into the office?
Absolutely right. And I there's a lot of talk about the Great Resignation. I think it's actually more of a migration. People are moving and they're changing, and their roles are changing, and they are going into new roles. Of course they are. But I think like a little bit like that when we were all in lockdown, the sort of the decision making and some of that power has shifted to the employee, where they're going, you know what, my life's moved on. You know what, I have a much better relationship with my kids. This is different. That's better. Whatever it is, I'm not willing to sacrifice that and go back to that. It's kind of made me realize that 90 minutes from home into the office and then back again, to sit on a Zoom call with people that are doing exactly the same in other parts of the world, doesn't matter. I can do that from home, right? And if I blur my background or do whatever, you wouldn't even know where I was anyway. And I think that work from anywhere became really interesting for us. And certainly for me personally, I did, an event like this, but also a couple of Zoom calls. We were one of the ones that bought the camper van and off we go. The North Coast 500 is on our list, Martin. So we'll be passing by you at some point. But it's hooked up with 5G and Wi-Fi. I could be anywhere working. It doesn't matter, right? So I think that balance shifted significantly. All the tech's there. A lot of it's been there for a long time. We just didn't have that sort of compelling event or forcing function to say, right, we have to adopt it and use it now.
Yeah. And I think a prime one there is Teams, and everything integrating with Teams as well. Teams has been around for a long time, but people weren't using it properly. Suddenly they had to use it. And then there was another rocket ship, and that was all of the integrations to Teams, where people suddenly went, oh, while I'm in Teams, can I not just fire off a support call or look something up in the knowledge base without having to leave Teams? And it wasn't a requirement 2.5 years ago. There might have been a couple of innovative people doing it, but it wasn't a requirement. And then suddenly everybody was rushing to do it. So I think that whole collaborative ecosystem has really shot off. So I better move to my next slide, because as thoroughly expected, time's flying by, and we're nowhere near the end of the slide deck, but it doesn't matter.
It's okay.
My next question for you, having just come back from a giant event, is what did you see which you think is going to be big or new for 22, 22, 23, 24, 25, etc.? What's the latest? What haven't I seen because I missed the show?
What can I get Martin to buy and test, and then road test it before I have to buy it? No, I think, if I look at, it's all enterprise customers, right? That's who we're talking to us, which is great. I think they've got a lot of tech, right? No doubt about it. Many have, and there's a lot out there already. And it's not, there aren't necessarily new problems to solve, but there's better ways to solve them with newer technology, right? And whether that's automating them, removing manual tasks, freeing up time. I always sort of sit there and see, I get offered to try things, do things, and whatever it is. And I say, well, what's in it for me? If I do this today this way and I do that way tomorrow, is it any better? It might be cooler. And then after the sort of honeymoon period of having a new widget and a new gadget, I kind of think, it's still kind of the same, right? Just got a different problem now. So I think, a lot of what we're hearing is experience really, really matters. And that's not just having things that look pretty and beautiful, but they're functional, but they work and support me in my job. But in the same time, the human side of that is when I do get to that point where I engage or interact with a bot or an agent or a human being, imagine that on the other end of it, it's a good one, right? It's contextual. They know who I am. They know what I use. I know what I have and sort of what the challenges are. If I can help myself and self-serve, brilliant. Or maybe there's a repetitive task that, like you were talking about earlier, the client server side of things or some legacy technologies, they don't lend themselves necessarily all the time to integrations and automation stuff. So you've got, RPA, hyper automation type stuff is huge. AI ML, is getting stronger in terms of adoption, but it's still a little toy-like in some cases. And you don't, that a lot of it's out there and behind the scenes, like, here's another thing to waste 24 hours of your life on Netflix or Amazon Prime. They're behind the scenes and it's learning. But where's the tipping point before enough is enough, right? We want a choice. We want to make do, and all those things. So I think for me, a lot of our clients really want those contextual experiences relevant to the employee, their role, their position, where they live in the world and all those good things. But then at the same time, really take automation to another level, that hyper automation. But underpin that, right? Don't just automate a bad process because it's just going to fail faster, but tell you it did. More sort of mine the data. How are people actually using our tools and our technology and our platforms, and learn from it that, hey, well, actually, the best will in the world, the process, good practice, whatever you want to call it, looks like this. In reality, that's not how people do it. But also, given the work from anywhere scenario or any device scenario, it has to be different, but it has to be flexible to accommodate for that, right? And often people talk about, the best support is no support. It just works, right? That'd be a beautiful thing, right? Or when it does go beep in the night, you're proactively telling me that there is an issue, or is there an alternative to do different things? So I think they're not necessarily new trends, right? That's not any different, but I think the tech is all there. It's a maturity side of things that our clients have to get towards and create those rich, compelling experiences. And just yesterday, I was talking to a customer and they were saying, yeah, well, we want this, but we want a wow factor. I'm like, okay, tell me what a wow factor is. Put that in a requirement or a story. And I sort of then went back and said, what are the top 3 apps that you use on your phone? And you use them because you like them. And what are the features about them that really make them that wow factor? And then they suddenly went, right. And then they could articulate what it was, versus when you look at any enterprise platform, they're not the most intuitive in the world. And who are they really built for? The end user or the person doing the work, right? So a lot of that sort of empathetic design, if you will, and human design thinking, that's a lot of where we're going to really make it about the individual, but meet them where they are, not where we think they're going to be.
I think that last one's a great point, in that I've been banging on for years about service portals and why aren't they contextual, right? So if you know what operating system I've got, if you know what products I've got, if you know all about my downloads and upgrades, why, when I log on, isn't
Yep.
the portal tailored to what
Yep.
those technical things are, but also what my location is? So if there are
Yep.
outages in my location, why doesn't it know?
Yep.
What my job role is, why doesn't it know that people in my job role use the following software and are currently having problems doing X, Y, Z? Why
Yep.
doesn't it know all of these things in a contextual manner? And therefore, when I log on, that I get a user experience for me, not a generic platform-wide, corporate-wide experience. That's all for me. And I do actually think the pandemic has helped in that AI and ML and all these sort of things that may drive those contextual feelings. They'll have had a lot of data gathered over that period that they may not already have gathered under other circumstances, because all of the channels become digital channels. It's not walk-ins, it's not telephones. It all became digital channels. So AI, ML, they need data to learn to get better. But I definitely think that the whole contextual thing can be driven much, much, much better than it has been in the past. And we probably now have the capability to be doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even better than that, we've done it. I've got 4 examples of clients we've done this. And even the simple thing of, hey, good morning, Chris. Hey, it's 31. No, it wouldn't be, would it? It would be 14 degrees in Edinburgh. How can we help you today, right? Or whatever it is. Just like, oh, okay. There's a little about my name because I've authenticated. Knows my location because of my profile. Happy days. Pull in the weather. That's cool, right? Or it's, hey, near you, it's this. Or, people in your team, this is their current time zone. They're in bed. Don't call them, sort of thing. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, right? But you're right. Know about me and things around me and the things that I do. And the cool thing is, through that portal technology, that interaction on the web and mobile, whatever, we've got some great examples of where we've done that for some massive customers around the world. And they love it. They absolutely love it, right? Because then when ultimately you get through to, having an issue or logging an issue or talking to a human, you've taken some of that frustration out of the process, right? And at the end of the day, it's IT. It's going to go wrong. It does go wrong. We get it. But then if you just go about it in a much better personal contextual way, you got a better chance of having a happy employee.
I think we're coming towards the end of the show because we're overrun already, but I think that's a fine note for us to go to the next scene. Bear with me. So this was meant to be our Q&A, but we've already overran by nearly 10 minutes. So I get to ask you your final question, which was the first question of the whole show. What was your first computer, Chris?
So my first computer was the Commodore 64. So, and I did Google that as well the other day, and you can get an emulator for the Mac, and you can download all games. So, yeah, that might be happening soon enough. I had no idea you could do that, but it was for them. I think it was their fastest ever selling machine as well. With a mighty 64 kilobytes of memory.
I also had one of those, but it wasn't my first. I had a couple before that as well. And my last guest, Ian Cameron from Aberdeen University, his was ZX Spectrum, and that was mine too. And he did tell a story of how he destroyed it by playing something called Daley Thompson's Decathlon, those who remember Daley Thompson, which, as in all of these early games, just meant hitting keys as often and as hard as possible.
Yep.
Which never was going to be a really good idea, was it, for the longevity of a Clive Sinclair keyboard, I don't suppose. But,
exactly right.
Anyway, I will ask that question to all of my guests. We will just roll you out here, Chris, but thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
It's another rocket ship that I'll get told off for, and I think it might come back again in a minute. But it's been great talking to you.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
And we will hang out in the green room for a minute, and I'll say cheerio to you, and I'm just going to close off the show for everybody else. But see you later, Chris.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Okay, so that was Chris, and thanks to Chris. Coming up soon, Claire Agata will be joining me on one of our IT shows. So do keep an eye on LinkedIn. If you're not already connected with me, do connect with me. Next time, I'll remember to put the QR code up on the screen, so if you can point your phone at the screen and track me. That's a call to action, which I really should have put in at the end of the show. But thanks for joining me. For now, that's cheerio, game over from Edinburgh. See you later. Bye for now. Chris.
There we go. Awesome.
That was fun.
Yeah, really good. Thank you for setting that up. Really good.
Yeah. I mean, we could do with more people interacting, you know, but there was some coming in and interacting. I need to end that broadcast. Hang on. Press end.